So with that, again, you've introduced and welcomed our guest, Congressman Paul. I'm new to the Congressman Paul presidential campaign bandwagon, so I want to really understand a little bit more about your political philosophy and your background. You described yourself as a constitutionalist. What does that mean?
That means that you have high respect for the Constitution, and it's the only oath that you take when you go into office as a congressman, or even when you serve in the military, or you're sworn in as a president. You swear to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, domestic and foreign. And that contract is very important, and I believe that our Constitution was probably the best ever written as an agreement between the people and the government. And it's imperfect. Nothing is perfect that man creates. But the principle of the rule of law should be sought after. That is, that if you have a contract, you should follow it. If you disagree with part of that contract, you should change it in the proper manner. But ignoring it is the worst thing you can do. And that's what we've done. If you take the war issue, we don't declare wars anymore. We go to war under UN resolutions. We go into war for all kinds of ill-advised reasons, and
so it's not the idea of war that you're opposed to.
Well, not entirely, but I'm against the idea of war when it's not called for. But going to war in a unconstitutional manner is very, very detrimental because it undermines the whole system. How can, if I vote for an illegal war, why would I be a good defender of your First Amendment rights or your Second Amendment rights or any part of the Constitution? And we unfortunately are delivering to this new generation a system of government where there's very little respect for the Constitution. And you know, we have the executive branch abusing it constantly. You can't depend on the judicial branch, and you certainly can't depend on the Congress to protect our liberties.
So again, I want to actually go through a bunch of specific examples. So clearly, you voted against the war in Iraq, and had it been a properly authorized resolution of war, I assume based on what you've said, you would not have supported that.
I would not have.
Right.
Matter of fact, when it came up in the IRR committee on which I served, I made them vote on it. And said, if you other members want to go to war, you should do it properly. Get the country together behind you, and fight it, win it, and get it over with, and get home, if it's indeed a necessary war. But they didn't have that debate, and they just ridiculed that idea, and they said that part of the Constitution was anachronistic, and we don't do it. But here we are today, having the debate that we should have had 4 years ago. But they didn't want the debate, and now everybody's scurrying around to cover themselves about why they endorse the war and now why they don't. And they could have avoided it twice if they'd have agreed with me that it was an unnecessary war, our national security was not threatened, or if they just would have resorted to the rule of law, they could have protected themselves. So there's two ways they should have been able to protect themselves, but now the Congress is up there passing all kinds of resolutions pretending that they're bowing to the people's will, and they're actually helpless in doing anything serious about getting us out of Iraq.
Would you have voted also against going to war in Afghanistan, against the Taliban and the bases that Al-Qaeda had there?
Well, we really didn't declare war against Afghanistan, and I would have voted against authority to go into Afghanistan, take it over, and nation build. Besides, that effort was designed for some economic reasons of oil and gas pipelines and things. That's why they had to take over Afghanistan. But I did vote for the authority to go after the Al-Qaeda, believing that targeting the individual in the group that was seemed to be very likely the people who brought about 9/11. I did, but the authority given and the money given was totally abused. We went into nation building. Where's Osama bin Laden? He's in Pakistan. Pakistan is a military dictatorship that we support, and now we subsidize, and they have nuclear weapons. So it makes no sense whatsoever with this ridiculous foreign policy that we have. So no, I would oppose and never intended for the president to misuse that authority. I wanted him to go after. So what happened? We ignored Osama bin Laden and said, oh, let's go to war against Iraq. So those are the kind of irrational policies that I'm trying to fight.
So in the Paul administration, what would be the policy given that we are where we are today in Iraq?
Well, the one thing is the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president should be reminded, and I would remind myself, you're not the commander-in-chief of the government, of the country and all the people. I mean, there's no massive definition that the president has these arbitrary powers just because he's the commander-in-chief. But the commander-in-chief of the forces can move the armed forces around. I'd move them around quickly. I'd bring them home.
So immediately, just
Yes, I'd bring them home as soon as possible and safely, because
safely for the troops, safely for the people who remain in Iraq?
Safely for the troops and for Americans. Because my responsibility, I have a moral responsibility to protect Americans, American property, the American rule of law, and the Constitution.
Do you think at this point America or Americans have any moral responsibility for what happens in Iraq?
Yeah, I think the neoconservatives deserve the blame, and they have moral responsibility, but you don't. I don't blame you for their mismanagement of the war, so I can't penalize you. I can do my best. And I actually sincerely believe that we are the motivation for the civil war over there, so I would not be causing more chaos. If there is, it's because we went in. It's not because we're leaving, although there may be a blip upward or downwards. But ultimately, I'm a bit more optimistic than most. Everybody who's predicting these dire things to happen are the ones who said it would be, smooth and easy and paid for, and there'd be no problem.